So with the release of Matt Reeves' Batman, we're gonna finally go ahead and rank all the Batman movies from the worst to the best. Hi, my name's Isaiah. I run the Isaiah Tops channel. Let's go ahead and follow my Instagram above. I will also leave a link to that down below in the comment section. Also, a few rules going into this ranking. Number one, I am not involving the Justice League movies or Suicide Squad or any of that, because those are not a Batman title movie. Number two, I am not including Mask of the Phantasm because, in my opinion, it still beats out a large majority of these movies, including The Dark Knight. Number three, let's have fun. Kicking it off, we have the worst one, which is Batman and Robin. Oh my gosh. One word or one scene I could show you that automatically shows why this is this low.
7 million. Never leave the cave without it.
Okay, so literally the beginning of the movie, it should have known what you were getting yourself into when you saw bat nipples. Now, Batman Forever had a little bit of nippage, just a slight little bit of nip. Just a little bit of nip. This one, they have full protrusive bat nipples that looks like tentacles could fly out and start entangling the entire bat cave. Not to mention booty. Arnold Schwarzenegger and his weird freeze puns, Emma Stone or Emma Thurman, or however you pronounce her name, and their weird mannerisms, and just everybody in this movie is over the top. Now, if there's one good thing I could say about this movie, that is Chris O'Donnell's Robin. I think he's pretty okay in the movie, and Alfred is fine. I mean, that version of Alfred has always been just okay. But yeah, definitely the worst Batman movie, and one of the worst superhero movies for a very good reason. Kicking it off, at this point, we have Batman 1966. This isn't a bad movie, but it's not really. Okay, so the reason why it's this low is because it's not really a movie. All it is just an extended, budgeted version of the actual show with an extended length. Now, I mean, that could be seen as a good thing or a bad thing for a lot of people, because a lot of people love that 66 show. I'm just not one of them. I mean, I will give credit where credit is due. It worked for the time it was at, and I mean, I will even watch it every now and then if I want to have a good laugh. But not my favorite interpretation of the character, although tons of respect to Adam West, and rest in peace Adam West. Coming up next is going to be very divisive, and that's The Dark Knight Rises. I watched this movie years ago, and I used to think it was the greatest movie of all time. Watching it now, I don't think that's the case. Now, this point on, all the movies are not bad at all. Like, I actually think they're good to solid. But this one, for some reason, has just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth after watching it all these years now. For example, Tom Hardy's Bane, I mean, I think he's good, but he's not like the Bane I would imagine wanting to see on screen. Like, and part of the reason why is because Christopher Nolan grounds this so much to the point where you can't have elements such as the Venom anymore, even though you could do a play on the Venom using like some sort of steroid or injection things that he could have on his body or something. But he wants to keep it so realistic, so grounded, that you can't have elements like that. Not to mention the fact that our boy Bruce Wayne has only been Batman technically for a year, and he's already retired for several more years. What would it be like if it was in year 2? Would he just straight up be dead? There are a lot of things that are just convenient, a lot of things that just play out for the reason of being played out. For example, they make a big deal about his knee. But then later he fixes his, like wears his brace, right? He has to wear the brace to walk. But when he's in the cave and he gets out, he doesn't have the brace on, so he's walking perfectly fine. What? Not to mention that they're not accurate to what Robin should be. He's just some cop, and then he gives him the location to the Batcave, basically sending him to his own death because this dude has no ninja training, none of that. So the moment he puts on that suit and starts fighting crime, he's a dead man. But there are some elements to enjoy to this. I mean, it is the conclusion, and it's a very emotional conclusion to a very good series. Not my personal favorite. And yeah, Bale Man's voice is really bad.
Where's the trigger? Where is it? You never give it to an ordinary citizen. Where is it? Where's the trigger?
Next up, we have Batman Forever, which I did kind of sort of review on, but I called it Batman Forever is a good movie. Check that down below. I'll leave that in the description. But I actually never hated Batman Forever. I always thought it was actually a fun movie. It definitely has its moments where it's bad, but there are a lot of undertones and a lot of very interesting story beats that could be seen from this movie. And plus, from a visual aesthetic, this is one of the more fascinating looking Batman movies. I mean, They have a lot of lights and fluorescent light bulbs just pretty much everywhere in this movie. But the way they kind of make Gotham look filthy, but at the same time very lit, very just like neo-Gothamish, it's just such an interesting look at it. And plus the Batsuit is a slight improvement from Keaton. It's just that, you know, they have a little bit of nippage and that kind of makes it look a little bit weird. It does have its moments, it does a lot of things right. There are several things that they do wrong. For example, Tommy Lee Jones' Two-Face trying to upstage Jim Carrey, which, bruh, you're not gonna upstage Jim Carrey. All in all, a good solid film, but not amazing, and definitely not one of the better ones. Going up is Batman vs. Superman. This movie is part Batman movie and part Superman movie, which the Batman moments are the best parts of the movie. But there's still even problems with those. Now, I've never been okay, so I've kind of learned to accept that Batfleck kills, but at the same time, I mean, what makes the character of Batman so fascinating is that role, because it can be explored, it can be exploited, and that's what creates the fascination with him and other characters. You take that away, he's not as fascinating. He's just basically like the Punisher with a cowl on. And that's something I didn't like, but there are several things that Zack Snyder gets right. For example, the visual aesthetic of his Batman just feels right out of the comic book. Definitely with the large flowing cape and the gray black bat suit. Definitely everything there works perfectly fine. It's just the elements with his Bruce Wayne, you know, not like, how does he know so much about Superman, but he doesn't know anything about these other heroes? Like, you know, like, for a person who's supposed to be the world's greatest detective, and from the comic books, he's the type of person who studies people, how do you not know about them? Like, just simple stuff like that just kind of brings us down for me. And there are plenty of other reasons, because the Superman storyline has a lot of issues as well. But overall, I never hated this movie. I always thought it was a decent film. And yeah, definitely in this place for a reason. Next up, we have Batman 1989. This one, it's kind of weird for me because I really like this one. It's a very entertaining, fun movie, but it's not really a Batman movie. What? It's mostly a Joker movie if you look at it a lot, because it mostly follows Jack Nicholson's Joker, but Bruce Wayne, in a weird way, feels a little bit shoehorned in, and that's my biggest problem with this one, is the fact that, you know, when he does show up, he's cool, but they don't really develop his Bruce Wayne as much. But the story is much more cohesive than a lot of the other movies that I was talking about in the list. And they do have a clear goal. They have a point A to point B. Maybe Batman himself does not develop, but there are a lot of character moments that are just very iconic. And this is the movie that got Batman started in theaters, like really got it started. So we have a lot of things to think to this movie. And from a visual aesthetic, this Gotham has always looked fantastic. Burton's Gotham, more so than Nolan's, just feels the most like Gotham City that we've gotten. Maybe even still to this day, but I will talk about that when I talk about where the Batman ranks.
Never rub another man's rhubarb.
Next up, we have Batman Returns. Now, this movie is a bit divisive for people, and I can understand why. They really let Tim Burton have free reign over this movie. So we have, you know, Penguins talking about, you know, flippers.
Wait, I'd like to fill her void.
I need signatures to overturn the ballot. I can supply those, Oswald.
Teach her my French flipper trick.
Penguins biting off noses. Batman strapping bombs to people. But you know what? What this film does is that it takes everything from the first movie and amplifies it and makes it better. The Batman character is much more prevalent in this movie, and his Bruce Wayne is much more developed, but not overly developed to the point where I can say this ranks higher than some of the other movies in this list. But the main reason why this is ranked so high is because Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman has still not been beaten to this day, in my opinion. She has such a presence in this movie, and her character arc from point A to point B is just something to behold, and it's something that's always been very fascinating about the interpretation of Catwoman. Everybody does this great job except Max Schreck. What is up with Christopher Walken in this movie? But yeah, that's where Batman Returns ranks. Next up is the most hated one that people are gonna be hating me for. People are gonna be hating me for this. The Dark Knight.
Oh, bro.
I know. People are gonna be like, what? Why is this low? Well, because I mean, like I said, I think The Dark Knight is the better film to Batman Begins. I never said it wasn't. It's the better film. But even still, this is not a Batman movie if you really look at it. This is more of a crime thriller that has Batman in there, which, again, works. But there are elements in this movie that kind of bother me just a little bit, that just bring this down just a little bit for me personally. Now, this is just personal preference. Number one, Batman sounds like a complete retard.
What happened to Rachel wasn't chance. We decided to act. We three. You'll be in a padded cell forever. This city just showed you that it's full of people ready to believe in good.
Number two, Harvey Dent. I feel like even though he was built up throughout the entire movie, they kind of, like, the third act was over very quickly, but the way they had Harvey kind of go out, like, why does every Batman movie need to kill off its villain? That's something I cannot stand when they do that in a Batman movie. If you're gonna kill off the villain, do it ceremoniously. Not just like push him off the ledge and just kill him. Which again, Batman goes into retirement, but he comes back. I'm like, but in the later films, they never acknowledge the fact that he feels completely guilty about killing Harvey. You see what I mean? So there's like really there's like nothing for that after that character. But the biggest reason why this is this high up, and the reason why this film is known to be as iconic as it is mostly, if you really think about it, it's mostly because of Heath Ledger's Joker.
Is like gravity. All it takes is a little push.
And Heath Ledger's Joker is amazing in this movie, and his performance still hasn't been topped. And for that reason, The Dark Knight is the amazing movie that it is, just not my personal favorite. Next up, we have Batman Begins. Batman Begins just feels more Batman to me. For example, its Gotham City looks more like Gotham City than in the later films, because in the later films they look like Chicago, but in this you get looks at the Narrows, and the Narrows look filthy, they look run down. It looks exactly what I would think about what a majority of Gotham City would look like. Plus, not to mention the fact that this is a very Bruce Wayne heavy story, developing the character, going into why he becomes Batman. And this set a trend for comic book movies going forward too, because a lot of them try to imitate Batman Begins. So for that reason, you could tell it made the impact that it made. And at the end, the character does hit a certain point, and this ultimately feels like a good, genuine Batman movie. And the voice is not over the top, except for one scene.
Why?
Where I think this movie kind of falls apart for a lot of people is the third act, where a movie that's so grounded finally has like this big moment where gas is flooding the city and people are hallucinating and experiencing fear. I like that element because it does keep some comic book elements to Batman. Whether you want to admit it or not, you cannot ground Batman entirely. There's always gonna be a fantastical element to the character of Batman, whether you want to admit it or not. And this movie does kind of embrace quite a bit of that in the third act. Like I said, I can understand that Batman Begins is not your personal favorite in the Nolan trilogy, but it is my personal favorite. Which then we're going to the next one, and yes, this is The Batman. The Batman does so much right with all of this character in this world of Gotham City. In other movies, you could never understand why a lot of people hated Gotham City. Yeah, you look at this movie, you could definitely understand why people hate this city. This city is a piece of crap. I just love how dirty the city feels. The city itself is a character, and that's something none of the other Batman movies quite understood, is that Gotham City itself is a character. Its inhabitants also have their own character. And this film plays kind of like a year one, even though it's a year two, it plays kind of like a year one Batman story. Earth 1, Batman 0, and The Long Halloween. All the best elements from those comic books brought together in something that's very unique, very different, and a very different take on the character, but at the same time feeling like something very familiar. This is the Batman that I've always wanted to see on screen. One that comes in that's not extremely polished. Like, there are moments in fights, like, which is so realistic because he's fighting people, he gets hit, he gets angrier, hits them. Like, he gets hit, this is the most I've seen Batman get hit in fights. but it's realistic because in a realistic fight, you're gonna get hit.
I'm vengeance.
There are elements in this movie, like for example, I'm not spoiling anything, but you see it in the trailer, he's walking around in a disguise. It is so reminiscent to Year One, where he's walking around wearing the kind of disguise, undercover look, and he's scouring the streets, kind of observing things. He does that in this movie. He also has moments where he's the world's greatest detective. We never seen that explored. No, I'm sorry, I don't care what none of y'all say. Reconstructing a bullet to find fingerprints, he came up with the idea, but he went to Lucius Fox to complete the idea, and not to mention the fact that Lucius Fox does a lot of the work for him, including The Dark Knight Rises, where he says, give this drive to Fox, have him decode the system.
CF Selena Kyle. Get this to Fox. He can crack the code and tell us what trades they were executing.
Here we get full-on Detective Batman. The Riddler is terrifying in this movie. All the characters are so fleshed out. This world feels so intertwined. It feels like the most Batman world that we've ever gotten on screen, while being something completely different that the audience isn't necessarily used to. Even though it is something that is very different, especially with his Bruce Wayne being much more of a recluse, someone who's not that billionaire playboy, but he will get to that point. He has so much room to grow, but at the same time, this movie is the best interpretation of the character that we've gotten on screen so far. If you guys have a problem with that, come at me, bro. But that's just my rankings of the Batman movies. What were your guys' rankings for the Batman movies? Comment below, let me know. And if you guys liked the video, make sure to subscribe today to join the Civilization.